Chapter 1. The late June sun was brutal, hot enough to melt the Manhattan asphalt. Serena Hayes, 7 months pregnant and heavy with child, slowly made her way into the obstetrics waiting area at Manhattan General Hospital. A fine layer of sweat glistened on her forehead. She found a seat by the window and carefully straightened out her prenatal chart. Stamped in red ink across the top were the words advanced maternal age and mild anemia. She glanced at them, pursed her lips, and brushed it off. Getting pregnant at 35 certainly wasn't considered young anymore. But her baby was well-behaved. From conception until now, the child had barely given her any grief. "Excuse me, I saved this seat." A sharp, piercing female voice dropped from above. Serena looked up to see a woman in a tailored Chanel suit standing before her in stiletto heels. Her chin was tilted upward, and a limited-edition Birkin bag dangled from her arm. Every inch of her screamed, "I am very expensive." Behind her stood 2 assistants, carrying her shopping bags, making it look less like a doctor's visit and more like a corporate inspection. Serena looked left and right. The waiting area was indeed full. However, she was sitting in a standard chair, not a priority seat. There was no rule stating she had to move. "There are empty seats over there," Serena said, her tone even, pointing to a few single chairs diagonally across the room. The woman in Chanel frowned, clearly unaccustomed to being told no. She looked Serena up and down, taking in the faded cotton maternity dress, her bare face devoid of makeup, her hair tied back carelessly, and the cheap canvas sneakers on her feet. Not a single designer label to be found. "I said, I want this seat." The woman snapped, her impatience flaring as she tapped her manicured fingernail against the armrest of Serena's chair. "I prefer sitting by the window. The ventilation is better." Serena didn't move. At 7 months pregnant, her back ached constantly, and standing for too long made her ankles swell. She had been sitting here for 10 minutes and had only just caught her breath. "I'm sorry, but it's not really convenient for me to give up my seat right now." Serena smiled faintly, resting a protective hand over her belly. Her attitude was gentle but firm. The Chanel woman's face darkened instantly. She leaned in close, lowering her voice to a volume only the 2 of them could hear. "Do you have any idea who I am? My husband is the vice president of the Gallagher Group. Are you going to move or not? Don't make things difficult for yourself." Serena blinked, her expression unchanging. The Gallagher Group. She knew it. They were one of New York's top real estate dynasties, having expanded into finance, hospitality, and entertainment. In the past, hearing that name might have made her heart skip a beat. But now, "No," Serena said, her tone remaining calm, even holding a hint of amusement. "Your husband is the vice president, not the hospital director. And even if he were the director, there's no rule that dictates a pregnant woman must give up her seat to someone perfectly capable of standing." The woman clearly hadn't expected to hit a brick wall. Her face flushed red, and her voice rose several octaves. "What is your problem? I am nicely trying to negotiate with you. And what kind of attitude is that? You aren't negotiating. You're notifying me." Serena corrected her, unhurried. The other pregnant women in the waiting area were starting to stare. Some whispered among themselves. Others covertly pulled out their phones to record. A young woman sitting opposite them couldn't hold back. "Hey, she's 7 or 8 months pregnant. How can you even ask her to give up her seat? Have you no shame?" The Chanel woman, her pride wounded, let out a cold laugh. "Fine, keep sitting. I hope you enjoy it." She pulled out her phone and made a call right in front of Serena, deliberately projecting her voice so everyone in the room could hear. "Honey, I'm at the hospital for my checkup, and someone is bullying me." "Yes, at Manhattan General, the one affiliated with your company. Call the director and have the OBGYN waiting room cleared out. I refuse to sit with these riffraff." Hearing this, Serena couldn't help but let out a soft chuckle. "What are you laughing at?" the Chanel woman glared. "Nothing," Serena replied casually, looking down to organize her charts. "I was just thinking if your husband actually had that kind of power, you wouldn't be standing here fighting me for a chair." Ew. The woman's assistant quickly grabbed her arm, whispering, "Ma'am, let go. Don't lower yourself to the level of people like her. It's not worth getting stressed and affecting the baby." The words "people like her" floated lightly into Serena's ears. She wasn't angry. She simply flipped her chart to the last page. At the bottom, in small print, it read, "Attending hospital, Manhattan General. Partner institution, Vance Healthcare Group. Specialist on retainer, Serena Hayes, M.D. Ph.D. from Harvard Medical School, former head of perinatal medicine at Johns Hopkins." She had been a consulting physician at this hospital for 3 years. She had literally helped approve the layout design of this very waiting room. But today, she was here as a patient. Serena closed the file and said nothing, merely looking up at the Chanel woman. with a gaze as placid as if she were watching a toddler throw a tantrum. "What are you looking at?" The woman, infuriated by Serena's calm demeanor, reached out to snatch the chart from her hands. Just then, the glass doors of the waiting area were pushed open from the outside. A tall, broad-shouldered silhouette strode in against the light, trailed by 4 or 5 men in sharp business suits. His aura was so commanding that the temperature in the room seemed to drop a few degrees. The man looked to be in his late 30s, with chiseled features, a strong brow bone, and narrow eyes that were cold and piercing. He wore a bespoke charcoal suit, the cufflinks catching the light with an understated gleam. It wasn't the flashy swagger of new money, but the bone-deep, oppressive authority of someone who ruled from the very top. Instantly, the entire room fell dead silent. The Chanel woman's eyes lit up. Her demeanor flipped on a dime as she trotted forward on her stilettos, her voice suddenly saccharine sweet. "Mr. Vance, what brings you here? My husband said you were in a board meeting today." The man didn't even look at her. His gaze bypassed the woman's shoulder and landed squarely on the woman in the faded maternity dress sitting by the window. Serena saw him too. She froze for a second, instinctively pressing herself back against the chair as if trying to hide. The man closed the distance with long strides, stopping right in front of Serena. Without a single word, he leaned down and scooped her up into his arms in a smooth bridal carry. The movement was clean, decisive, and carried an undeniable dominance. Startled, Serena instinctively wrapped her arms around his neck. The sudden movement seemed to wake the baby, who delivered a sharp kick. "Julian Vance, put me down," Serena hissed, the tips of her ears burning red. Julian ignored her. Holding her securely against his chest, he turned his head to look at the Chanel woman, who was frozen in shock. His eyes were as glacial as a frozen lake in the dead of winter, devoid of any warmth. "Move," he said. His voice was a low rumble, stating a fact that left no room for debate. "You're blocking my wife's sunlight." The Chanel woman's face went from flushed to chalky white to a sickly shade of green. Her lips trembled, but she couldn't formulate a single syllable. Her husband was the vice president of the Gallagher Group, and the Gallagher Group was a subsidiary of Vance Enterprises. Julian Vance was the CEO of Vance Enterprises, the undisputed corporate royalty of New York. She had just demanded a pregnant woman give up her seat, and that pregnant woman was Julian Vance's wife. The waiting area remained pinned in stunned silence for 5 full seconds before erupting into a low buzz of chaotic whispers. Serena buried her face in the crook of Julian's neck, her voice muffled. "Julian, can you please not be so dramatic every time you make an entrance?" "No," Julian replied, carrying her toward the exit with confident strides. "My wife was getting bullied. Am I not allowed to be a little dramatic?" "I wasn't bullied." "You were." "I was not." "Your ears are red. That's because you picked me up." Julian glanced down at her, the corner of his mouth ticking upward into the faintest hint of a smile. "Then I should hold you more, so you get used to it." Serena. She decided to shut up. Chapter 2. Mrs. Vance is not to be trifled with. Julian carried Serena straight into the office of the chief of obstetrics, drawing endless stares the whole way. Dr. Chloe Evans was reviewing an X-ray when the door opened. She looked up, saw Julian Vance carrying Serena into her office, and nearly dropped the film on the floor. "And Mr. Vance?" Chloe shot up from her desk. "What happened to Serena? Is everything okay?" "She's fine," Julian said, gently setting Serena down on the leather sofa before taking a seat beside her, crossing his long legs with natural elegance. "Just here for her checkup. Let's do the ultrasound." Chloe looked at Julian, then at Serena, her eyes darting between the two of them as she swallowed back her questions. Serena was her colleague, but also her close friend. Since getting pregnant, Serena had done all her prenatal care here, yet Chloe had never known who Serena's husband was. Serena's marital status was the hospital's biggest mystery. Her medical file listed her as married, but no one had ever seen the spouse. Serena always came to her appointments alone. Occasionally, a young male assistant would escort her to the door, but that was it. Rumors had floated around. Some whispered she was an unwed mother, or that her husband was a deadbeat she was too embarrassed to show. Chloe had asked once, and Serena had only smiled and said, "He's busy with work." Now she knew. It wasn't just work. He was busy holding the entire New York economy in the palm of his hand. "Right, well," Chloe cleared her throat, deciding to pretend this was entirely normal. "The ultrasound room is prepped. You can head straight in." Serena nodded. She pushed against the armrest to stand up, but before she could fully straighten her back, Julian's hand was already on her waist. "Slow down," he murmured. His palm was broad and warm, supported her lower back with the perfect amount of pressure. Serena cast him a sidelong glance, but said nothing, letting him guide her out the door. In the ultrasound room, Serena lay back on the examination bed. She flinched slightly when the cold ultrasound gel hit her belly. Julian stood beside her, his gaze locked onto the small, curled-up figure on the monitor. His pupils dilated slightly. Here is the head, the arms, the legs. The technician explained as she guided the wand. Development is excellent. All indicators are perfectly normal, and the estimated weight is right on track. On the screen, the tiny life was sleeping peacefully, occasionally twitching a finger as if dreaming. Julian was silent for a long time. Then, he reached out and gently enveloped Serena's hand in his. His hand was trembling slightly. Serena felt it and turned her head to look at him. The man's profile was carved in sharp, rigid lines, his jaw clenched tight, but the rims of his eyes were faintly red. "Scared?" Serena asked softly. "No," Julian replied, his voice a bit hoarse. This is my first time seeing it." Serena's heart squeezed. They had been married for a year, and this was the first time Julian had accompanied her to a prenatal appointment. It wasn't that he didn't want to come. It was that she hadn't let him. From the day he met her, Julian had wanted to place her on a pedestal, eager to provide 24-hour personal protection. But Serena wasn't the type of woman who needed shielding. She had lived in the States independently for 8 years, working her way from undergrad to an M.D. Firmly establishing herself at a world-class institution like Johns Hopkins. She had built her life on her own merit, not under anyone's umbrella. She never wanted people to assume she married Julian Vance for his wealth or status. So, she never mentioned him at the hospital. She handled her checkups alone, did her rounds as usual, and even refused the private chauffeur Julian tried to assign her. "I could drive myself," she had said. "You are 7 months pregnant," Julian had argued. "I've seen chief surgeons perform operations at 9 months pregnant. That's them. I'm a doctor, too." Neither of them would back down, so they finally compromised. Julian's driver could wait in the hospital parking garage, but he had to park in the darkest, most remote corner so no one would see him. Serena still remembered the look on Julian's face when they agreed to that. He looked like he had swallowed a lemon. "Are you feeling terribly wronged?" Serena had teased him. "No," Julian had replied deadpan. "I'm the billionaire CEO of Vance Enterprises. If I don't even have the clearance to be my own wife's driver, what right do I have to feel wronged?" Serena had laughed and stood on her tiptoes to kiss his jaw. "All right, stop pouting." Julian had looked down at her, pulling her into his arms. Resting his chin on the top of her head, he mumbled, "Serena, when are you going to let me publicly be your husband?" "When I stop wanting to be Dr. Hayes." "And when will you stop wanting to be Dr. Hayes?" "Probably in my next life." Julian had been so frustrated he bit her earlobe. But now, in this moment, in the dim light of the ultrasound room, holding Serena's hand and looking at the screen, at the child that belonged to both of them, Julian suddenly felt that everything was worth it. Who cared about pride? Who cared about feeling wronged? She was willing to marry him. She was willing to bear his child. That was more than enough. "Serena," Julian suddenly spoke. From now on, I'm coming to every appointment." Serena looked at his reddened eyes and stayed silent for 2 seconds. "Okay," she said softly. Julian lowered his head, pressing his forehead against the back of her hand, remaining silent for a long time. The technician tactfully turned her head away, pretending to be deeply engrossed in analyzing the monitor. Chapter 3: Return of an Old Flame. After the appointment, Julian drove Serena home before heading to the corporate office. Serena lived in a sprawling, 3,000-square-foot luxury penthouse in one of Manhattan's most exclusive zip codes. Julian had purchased the property before they got married and put the deed strictly in her name. At the time, Serena had refused, saying it was far too extravagant a gift to accept. Julian had simply said, "Accept it anyway, because if you don't, I'll buy the entire building." "Try me." Serena believed him. When a man set his mind to something, there are no lengths he wouldn't go to. So she accepted it. Once home, Serena changed into comfortable loungewear, heated up a glass of milk, and sat on the balcony to soak in the afternoon sun. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from her best friend, Harper Quinn. "Harper, babe, did you check Twitter?" "Serena, no, why?" Harper sent a link. The headline screamed, "Vance Enterprises CEO Julian Vance photographed carrying wife in hospital. Mysterious Mrs. Vance revealed." Serena clicked it. It was a candid shot taken in the waiting room earlier today. In the photo, Julian was striding out, carrying her. Her face was buried in his neck, so she was unidentifiable, but Julian's sharp profile was captured with crystal clarity. The comment section was an absolute war zone. "Holy crap, Julian Vance is married? Who is that girl? How the hell did she bag Julian Vance? Look at her clothes. She clearly isn't from old money. Did some Cinderella just secure the bag? Why is everyone so bitter? If Julian Vance wants to carry her, It's his business. Rumor has it they were in the OBGYN ward. Mrs. Vance is pregnant and got harassed by some Karen. So Julian literally stormed in and carried her out. Wait, who was the woman who harassed her? Supposedly the wife of the VP at Gallagher Group. She tried to force Mrs. Vance to give up her seat and bragged about clearing the room. El Mayo imagined trying to flex on the literal CEO's wife. Career suicide much? VP of Gallagher Group? I bet he's fired by tomorrow morning. Serena frowned as she read through it. She hated being trending news, and she hated being gossiped about. But she had known this day would come. When you marry a man like Julian Vance, you can't stay hidden in the shadows forever. Her phone rang. It was Julian. Did you see the trending topics? His deep voice was steady, betraying no emotion. I saw. Do you want me to have my PR team wipe it? Serena thought for a moment. No, taking it down will just make us look guilty of something. There was a beat of silence on the other end, followed by a low chuckle. What's so funny? I'm laughing because my wife really is incredible, Julian said. Anyone else would either be crying and begging me to fix it or panicking to get the article scrubbed. But you're calmer than I am. It's not that big of a deal. Serena took a sip of her milk. Though, regarding the Gallagher VP's wife, don't make things too hard for her. Why not? She's pregnant. It's understandable that her hormones are all over the place. And she didn't actually hurt me. She just threw around some nasty words. She demanded you give up your seat. And I didn't. She insulted you. Words didn't break my bones. Julian went quiet again. Then he said, Serena, have you ever considered that the reason you can brush it off is because you were strong enough to defend yourself? But what about someone else? If it hadn't been you sitting in that chair today, but a truly vulnerable pregnant woman, what kind of abuse would she have suffered? Serena's hand paused on her glass. You're right, she said softly. I didn't think of it that way. So let me handle this, Julian said. It's not just about avenging you. It's about setting boundaries. What kind of boundaries? That in this circle, no one is allowed to throw their weight around to bully others. Julian's voice was light, but absolute. Especially not pregnant women. Serena didn't argue further. She knew Julian measured his actions carefully. She didn't need to micromanage him. After hanging up, Serena leaned back against the sofa, closing her eyes to rest. The sunlight pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows was warm and sleep-inducing. In her drowsy state, she heard the doorbell ring. The housekeeper answered it, followed by the crisp, sharp sound of high heels clicking against the marble floor. Serena opened her eyes to see a woman standing in the living room. She was in her early 30s, tall, with features so exquisite she looked like she had stepped off the cover of Vogue. Dressed in an immaculately tailored white dress, her long hair cascaded over her shoulders. She radiated an aloof, old-money elegance, carrying an aura of someone entirely untouched by the mundane struggles of the world. Serena knew exactly who she was. Actually, the entirety of New York's high society knew who she was. Victoria Kensington, Julian Vance's college sweetheart, the undisputed golden girl of their social circle. Back in the day, their romance had been legendary. The perfect pairing of beauty, brains, and elite pedigrees. Everyone assumed they would get married, but for reasons unknown, they broke up during their junior year. Afterward, Victoria went abroad to Europe and hadn't returned for 15 years. But now she was back, standing right in Serena's living room, calmly assessing her. You must be Serena? Victoria spoke. Her voice was cool and melodic, like a crystal-clear spring. Serena braced her hands against the armrests and slowly sat upright. She didn't stand, nor did she look flustered. She met Victoria's gaze evenly, a faint smile touching her lips. I am. And you are. Victoria, the woman offered her name, as if confirming a suspicion. An old friend. Of Julian's. Old friend. The phrasing was delicate, not too distant, not too intimate, but leaving a massive amount of room for imagination. Serena nodded, her expression unruffled. Hello. Please have a seat. Would you like coffee or tea? Victoria seemed slightly taken aback by the casual response. She looked Serena over, her gaze lingering on the noticeable bump of her stomach for a fraction of a second before moving away. No need, Victoria said. I just came to inform you of something. Go ahead. I recently moved back to the States to accept a position as the chief medical advisor for Vance Healthcare. Victoria paused. Julian knows about this. He personally approved my hire. Serena's fingers tapped lightly against the sofa's armrest. Vance Healthcare. Chapter 4. She is no Cinderella. That was one of the crown jewels of Vance Enterprises, a division Julian oversaw directly. And the role of chief medical advisor didn't require board approval. Julian could make that call single-handedly. And he hadn't told her. And Serena asked, her tone steady. Victoria stared at her, a hint of scrutiny creeping into her eyes. You aren't angry? Why should I be? You should know about our past, Victoria said. He approved my hiring without telling you. You don't see an issue with that. Serena laughed. When she smiled, her eyes crinkled into crescents, revealing the slight hint of a canine tooth that made her look entirely harmless. But anyone who actually knew her understood that the sweeter her smile, the sharper her mind was working. Ms. Kensington, Serena began. First of all, Julian is the CEO of Vance Enterprises. He has the absolute right to appoint whoever is qualified for an executive position. If he rejected the best candidate for the job based on personal history, that would be unprofessional. Victoria's eyelashes fluttered slightly. Secondly, Serena continued, anything regarding my marriage with Julian doesn't require a third-party mediator. If you think he did something wrong, you should be having this conversation with him in his office, not with me in my living room. Victoria fell silent for a few seconds before letting out a soft laugh. You're not quite what I imagined. And what exactly did you imagine? An average girl who got incredibly lucky, Victoria admitted candidly. But looking at you now, Julian's taste is as impeccable as ever. Serena didn't take offense at the underlying presumption. In fact, she somewhat appreciated Victoria's bluntness. Thank you, Serena said. But luck had nothing to do with getting me where I am. Victoria looked at her, suddenly realizing this woman possessed a very strange gravity. It wasn't an aggressive, in-your-face dominance, but an internalized, quiet certainty, like the deep ocean, calm on the surface, but holding unfathomable power underneath. Understand? Victoria stood up and smoothed her dress. Sorry for the intrusion. She took a few steps toward the exit, then suddenly stopped and looked back. Serena, there is something I want to tell you. What is it? Julian and I broke up because his family didn't approve of me. His mother felt my family's standing wasn't elite enough to match the Vances. Victoria's tone was airy, like she was recounting a story about strangers. He fought with his family over it for a long time, but in the end, we still couldn't make it work. Serena listened quietly. I know he never married after that. Not until he met you, Victoria said. So I wanted to see for myself exactly what kind of woman could finally make him willingly walk down the aisle. And did you see it? Victoria looked at her, the corners of her lips curling into a complex, unreadable smile. I did, she said. A woman who has earned my absolute respect. With that, she turned and left. The sharp click of her heels faded away, eventually swallowed by the chime of the elevator doors. Serena sat alone on the sofa. She looked down at her rounded belly and let out a soft sigh. Well, baby, she murmured, Daddy's ex-girlfriend just paid Mommy a visit. What do you think Mommy should do? The little one inside delivered a solid kick. Serena winced at the impact, but grinned. Yeah, you think Mommy's got this handled too, don't you? The news of Victoria Kensington's return spread through New York's elite circles like wildfire. And right behind it came a tidal wave of rumors and speculation. Some claimed Victoria came back specifically for Julian, unable to let him go even after 15 years. Others whispered that Julian still held a torch for her. Why else would he personally sign off on her executive contract? And naturally, there were those who pitted Serena, murmuring about how a regular doctor could possibly survive a turf war with an aristocratic heiress like Victoria. The gossip was deafening, but Serena offered zero response. She went to work, attended her checkups, and sat in her office consulting with expectant mothers, answering their questions with infinite patience. One afternoon, a very specific patient walked into Serena's office. It was a young woman in her late 20s. Her face was ashen, her eyes swollen red. She looked as though she had been crying for hours. She sat across from Serena, her hands tightly wrung together, her lips trembling before she finally managed to speak. Dr. Hayes, I need to schedule an abortion. Serena didn't rush to speak. Instead, she opened the patient's medical file. You're at 20 weeks. Fetal development is normal, and all maternal health indicators are excellent, Serena noted, closing the file and looking at the young woman. Can you tell me why? The woman's tears spilled over immediately. My husband, he's seeing someone else. He said he doesn't want this baby. He said if I go through with the pregnancy, he'll divorce me. Serena handed her a tissue, her voice gentle. Take a breath. Take your time. We found out it's a girl. His family is incredibly old school, obsessed with passing on the family legacy and securing an heir. He told me a daughter is worthless to him. The young woman broke down, burying her face in her arms against the desk, sobbing uncontrollably. Serena waited quietly for the storm of tears to pass. Then she spoke. I have a few things I'd like to say to you. Are you willing to listen? The young woman nodded weakly. First, Serena held up one finger. This child is yours, not anyone else's. Whether you keep her or not should be a decision based entirely on your own free will, not a transaction to appease someone else. The young woman looked up, stunned. Second, Serena raised a second finger. You are currently in a state of high emotional distress, which means you are in no condition to make an irreversible, life-altering decision. I'm going to give you 1 week. Go home. Think about it thoroughly. If in exactly 7 days you still feel the exact same way, I will help you make the arrangements. Third, Serena raised her third finger, her eyes locking onto the young woman with absolute sincerity. Whatever choice you ultimately make, ensure that it is the one you will not regret for the rest of your life. The young woman sat in silence for a long time. Finally, she wiped her eyes. Dr. Hayes, can I ask you a personal question? Go ahead. When you found out you were pregnant, did you ever think about not keeping it? Serena looked down at her own prominent belly and smiled softly. Never, she said. I prayed and hoped for this child for a very long time. No matter what anyone else thinks or says, I would never give her up. What about your husband? Was he supportive? Serena thought back to the ultrasound room, remembering Julian's trembling hands and reddened eyes. Her smile deepened. He cares about it even more than I do, Serena said. Did you know his hands literally shook the first time he saw the ultrasound monitor? Seeing the gentle, unshakable certainty radiating from Serena's face, the young woman suddenly felt the tight panic in her chest begin to ease. Thank you, Dr. Hayes. She stood up, taking a deep breath. I'll go home and think about it. All right. Serena stood up as well, supporting her back as she walked the patient to the door. Whatever you decide, if you need help, my door is always open. After the patient left, Serena sank back into her desk chair, massaging her aching lower back. Her phone vibrated on the desk. A text from Julian. Julian, just got the lab reports from today's checkup. Everything is perfect. But Dr. Evans noted your blood pressure was slightly elevated. Rest up. Don't overwork yourself. Serena typed back. Understood, Mr. Micromanager. Julian replied instantly. Call me husband. Serena. Husband. Julian. Good girl. What are you craving for dinner? I'll have the chef prep it. Serena. I want your homemade braised short ribs. Julian. Deal. I'll leave the office early and cook them for you. Looking at the screen, Serena couldn't suppress a laugh. To the rest of the world, this man was a ruthless corporate titan who could shift markets with a phone call, yet he was perfectly willing to put on an apron and slow-roast short ribs for her at the end of the day. Sometimes it felt like she must have saved the galaxy in a past life to deserve this. But most of the time, she simply knew she was worthy of it. She wasn't a Cinderella waiting to be rescued by a prince. She was Serena Hayes, accepted into pre-med at 17 in the top percentile, earned her M.D. and Ph.D. from Harvard Medical School by 26, became one of the youngest renowned maternal-fetal medicine specialists in the country by 28, and chose to leave a highly lucrative private sector offer to focus on frontline clinical work and research. Her resume alone was enough to silence any room. She just never bothered to parade it around, because she firmly believed a person's worth didn't need to be proven by their titles. Chapter 5. The First Love's True Intentions. Following her appointment to Vance Healthcare, Victoria Kensington proved to be ruthlessly competent. She spearheaded several major clinical research initiatives that sent shockwaves of approval through the medical industry. Her dynamic with Serena settled into a delicate equilibrium. They didn't intentionally seek each other out, nor did they deliberately avoid one another. When they crossed paths, they exchanged polite nods. And when their work required collaboration, their communication was flawlessly professional. But Serena was always aware of Victoria's evaluating gaze. It was as if Victoria was still measuring whether Serena was truly up to par. The turning point came over a weekend. Vance Healthcare was hosting a massive national medical symposium, and Serena was invited to sit on the panel as a keynote specialist. Victoria was also there, acting as the master of ceremonies. Halfway through the morning sessions, chaos erupted. A young resident physician in the audience suddenly collapsed, her face deathly pale, gasping for air. The auditorium spiraled into a panic. Someone yelled to call 911. Another person clumsily tried to perform chest compressions. Serena immediately stood up. Heavily pregnant, she navigated down the steps and knelt beside the collapsed doctor. Stop crowding her. Back away and give her some air, Serena commanded. Her voice wasn't a shout, but it possessed a stabilizing authority that cut through the panic. She expertly checked the young doctor's pulse, airway, and pupillary response. Looking up, she asked a nearby colleague, does she have any pre-existing conditions? She struggles with severe hypoglycemia. She's fainted twice before, the colleague stammered. Serena nodded. She immediately ordered someone to grab a glass of water dissolved with sugar packets and a few pieces of chocolate. Carefully cradling the young woman's head, she coaxed her to swallow small sips of the sugar water. Within minutes, the young doctor's eyelashes fluttered and color began returning to her cheeks. "You're okay." "It was a hypoglycemic syncope," Serena said, standing up. Her knees groaned in protest from squatting for so long, and she subtly pressed a hand against her lower back to steady herself. "Make sure you eat on a regular schedule from now on, and always keep hard candies in your pocket." The young doctor nodded weakly, full of gratitude. "Thank you, Dr. Hayes." The entire auditorium erupted into spontaneous applause. From her vantage point on the stage, Victoria watched Serena, 7 months pregnant, kneeling on the hard floor to save a life without a second thought. Victoria's eyes were filled with complex emotion. After the conference adjourned, Victoria caught up to Serena in the lobby. "Serena, wait a second." Serena stopped and turned around. Victoria descended the marble staircase, the rhythmic click of her heels echoing through the emptying hall. "Did you need something?" Victoria stopped in front of her, letting a few beats of silence pass before speaking. "I originally assumed Julian only married you because you got pregnant and he felt obligated to take responsibility." Serena raised a single eyebrow, but said nothing. "But now I know," Victoria said, looking directly into Serena's eyes. "He married you because you were exceptional." Serena waited quietly for her to finish. "When you were doing your residency, you published a groundbreaking paper on the management of preeclampsia. I cited your research heavily during my own doctoral dissertation," Victoria revealed. "I always pictured the author of that paper as some gray-haired, 60-year-old professor. I had no idea it was you." The plot twist was so sudden that Serena genuinely blinked in surprise before a smile broke across her face. "You've read my papers?" "More than just read them," Victoria said. "My entire thesis references your clinical findings in 3 separate chapters. Technically speaking, you're my academic senior." "So you didn't take the job at Vance Healthcare for Julian?" Victoria looked at her, and suddenly she smiled too. It wasn't the frosty, untouchable smile she usually wore. It was warm and entirely genuine. "To be completely honest, part of me did want to see exactly what kind of woman he married," Victoria confessed. "But the real reason I took the job was because I reviewed Vance Healthcare's 5-year expansion plan, and I realized it was an incredible platform worth dedicating my career to. And you," Victoria paused, "are one of the core pillars of that platform. I want us to work together." Serena studied her face for a few seconds. Then she extended her hand. "To a great partnership, then." Victoria looked down at Serena's outstretched hand, momentarily stunned, before reaching out and grasping it firmly. "To a great partnership." The two women smiled at each other, and in that single moment, every trace of misunderstanding and imaginary rivalry evaporated into thin air. That evening, Serena recounted the entire interaction to Julian. Julian was at the stove, finishing up the braised short ribs. Hearing the story, his hand paused on the spatula. "So, the two of you are friends now?" "Pretty much," Serena said, sitting at the kitchen island, resting her chin in her hands as she watched him cook. "Are you breathing a sigh of relief?" "Why would I be relieved?" Julian asked flatly, flipping a piece of meat in the pan. "Because you don't have to be caught in the middle, forced to choose between us." Julian turned off the burner. He picked up the heavy skillet, walked over to the island, and expertly plated the caramelized, perfectly glazed ribs. Then, he untied his apron, leaned across the marble counter, and planted both hands on either side of Serena, effectively boxing her in. "Serena," he said, his voice dropping into a dangerously magnetic register, "I was never in a position where I had to choose between you and her. Because from the very beginning, my choice was always you." Serena's ears betrayed her again, flushing a bright crimson. "You're supposed to be cooking. Don't lean in so close," she deflected. "No." Julian leaned in further, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Not only am I going to lean close, I'm going to kiss you. Julian Vance. Call me husband." "Husband. Good girl." Julian finally straightened up, looking thoroughly satisfied as he pushed the plate of ribs toward her. "Taste it. I used a little less sugar. Exactly how you like it." Serena picked up a rib with her fork and took a bite. The meat fell off the bone, the sweet and savory glaze perfectly balanced. "It's amazing," she mumbled through the food. Julian sat across from her, resting his chin on his knuckles, his eyes tracking her every movement. He couldn't wipe the grin off his face. "Serena, thank you. For what?" "Thank you for marrying me," Julian said, his gaze softer than a calm sea. "Thank you for being willing to have my child. Thank you for showing me what actual happiness looks like." A piece of meat still in her mouth, Serena's eyes suddenly welled up with tears. She swallowed hard, sniffled, and mumbled, "Julian, can you please not say things like that while I'm eating? It's highly disruptive to my appetite." Julian laughed softly, reaching across the table to wipe away the stray tear that escaped the corner of her eye. "All right, I'm done," he promised, placing another perfectly cooked rib onto her plate. Eat up. You and the baby both need the nutrients. Serena kept her head down, eating her food and quietly swallowing her tears of joy. She thought to herself that the absolute best decision she had ever made in her entire life was 3 years ago, on that rainy afternoon in a coffee shop, when she hadn't said no to the handsome stranger who asked to share her umbrella. Chapter 6. The Ultimate Comeuppance. Serena's identity couldn't stay a secret forever. The video of her stepping in to save the fainting doctor at the symposium had been recorded and posted online. Within hours, it went viral across Twitter and TikTok, racking up over 10 million views. In the comment sections, internet sleuths went to work, pulling up her entire academic history. Wait, hold up. That's Serena Hayes, M.D. Ph.D. from Harvard Medical School, author of over a dozen peer-reviewed papers, 2 of which were published in the New England Journal of Medicine. Wait a minute, is she the Dr. Hayes who developed the Hayes Protocol for managing gestational hypertension? That's the literal gold standard. My med school professor literally calls her one of the top specialists on the planet. Not one of the top. Where are all the trolls from last week calling her a gold-digging Cinderella? Come out, I just want to talk. This woman is an absolute titan in her field. Julian Vance didn't settle for her. This is the ultimate power couple. Talk about old money meeting elite intellect. Hey, update on that Gallagher VP's wife who demanded her seat. The husband was just fired by the board. Rumor has it he's under investigation for massive corporate embezzlement. Karma is beautiful. That's what you get for throwing your weight around. The public narrative flipped entirely overnight. The voices that had previously sneered at Serena for not being good enough for the Vance family vanished into the ether, replaced entirely by overwhelming awe and respect. When Serena saw the comments, she was sitting on her couch, eating the leftover braised short ribs Julian had made. She didn't feel any particular surge of triumph. The court of public opinion had never really mattered to her. However, one detail did make her laugh. The news of the Gallagher VP getting fired for embezzlement. Surprisingly, Julian hadn't orchestrated it. You probably won't believe me, but I actually had nothing to do with that, Julian said, leaning back on the opposite end of the couch, flipping through a copy of the Wall Street Journal, sounding entirely innocent. Oh, I believe you, Serena replied. If you actually wanted to crush him, you wouldn't have waited this long. Then why are you smiling? I'm smiling because some people think their biggest asset is the power they borrow from others. But in reality, their worst enemy is themselves, Serena observed. If he hadn't been cooking the books and stealing from his own company, nobody would have been able to touch him so easily. Julian lowered his newspaper, looking at her intently. You're starting to sound a lot like my mother. Excuse me? What is that supposed to mean? Nothing at all. I just mean you're incredibly wise. Julian corrected himself with desperate, lightning-fast survival instincts. Serena rolled her eyes at him, but the corners of her mouth stayed curled in a smile. Chapter 7. New Life. 1 month later, at Manhattan General Hospital, Serena successfully delivered a healthy baby girl. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. Both mother and daughter were perfectly healthy. Julian had been in the delivery room the entire time. He held Serena's hand, silently wiping the sweat from her forehead as she pushed through the agonizing contractions, and offered up his own forearm for her to bite down on when the pain peaked. The moment the nurses brought the baby over, Julian stared at the tiny, wrinkled, red face in absolute silence. Then, he leaned down and pressed a long, reverent kiss to Serena's sweat-drenched forehead. You did amazing, he choked out, his voice so raw and hoarse it was barely a whisper. Serena offered him an exhausted, weak smile. Look at our daughter. Julian received the swaddled infant with agonizing care. The hands that routinely signed billion-dollar merger documents were now trembling violently, as if he were holding the most fragile artifact in human history. She's so small, Julian breathed, a profound, uncharacteristic softness blanketing his voice. All newborns look like that, Serena murmured, her eyelids drooping heavily. She'll fill out in a few months. She looks exactly like you. Julian stared down at the infant's face, utterly captivated. She has your eyes, your nose, your mouth. Her features haven't even formed properly yet. How can you possibly tell? I could just tell, Julian insisted stubbornly. She looks just like you. Serena smiled in fond exasperation. She closed her eyes and finally drifted into a deep, heavy sleep. When she woke up, the private recovery suite was enveloped in quiet tranquility. Julian was sitting in the armchair beside her bed, cradling his daughter against his chest, murmuring to her in a low, hushed voice. Your mommy is incredible. She is the greatest doctor in the whole world, Julian whispered, careful not to wake Serena. When you grow up, you have to be just like her. Be brilliant. Be capable. Never rely on anyone else and build your own empire. Serena lay still, her eyes closed, but a soft smile bloomed on her lips. But Julian's voice shifted, dropping even softer. If you ever do need someone to rely on, Daddy is right here. No matter what kind of trouble you run into, Daddy will always burn the world down for you. You can't spoil her like that. Serena finally spoke, unable to hold back any longer. Julian looked up, realizing Serena was awake and watching him. A brilliant smile broke across his face. You're awake? I was woken up by you, Serena teased. You're giving a motivational speech to an infant who was born 6 hours ago. Do you really think she understands a word you're saying? Of course she does. Julian looked down at his daughter. Right, sweetheart. The newborn let out a tiny, squeaky yawn in response. Serena and Julian looked at each other and burst into quiet laughter. Outside, the golden afternoon sun filtered through the blinds, casting a warm, bright glow over the three of them. In this moment, all the storms and trials were behind them. In this moment, a beautiful new life had just begun. Chapter 8. Epilogue, a writer's note. When I finished writing this story, I sat at my laptop for a long time, just staring at the screen. The initial inspiration for this book came from a very simple thought. I wanted to write a female lead who didn't need to be saved. In so many billionaire romance novels, the sweetness of the story relies entirely on the heroine being pampered and protected. The male lead is absurdly wealthy, omnipotent, and solves every problem, while the female lead's only job is to look pretty and enjoy a stress-free existence. As a reader, it's undeniably fun escapism. But if you stop and think about it afterward, what does the heroine actually possess of her own? If she were to leave the male lead tomorrow, could she still thrive? In a lot of these tropes, that question doesn't hold up to scrutiny. So, I wanted to write a different kind of heroine. A woman who doesn't need a billionaire's protection to dominate the world she lives in. Serena Hayes is exactly that kind of woman. She is an elite medical specialist. She has her own career, her own ambitions, independent critical thinking, and a rock-solid moral compass. She refuses to be an accessory to anyone, and she isn't intimidated by anyone. Even when faced with her husband's legendary first love, she remains entirely poised and unbothered. A woman like that absolutely deserves to be loved and cherished. But more importantly, she doesn't need to be cherished to live a spectacular life. Her brilliance isn't something bestowed upon her by someone else. It radiates from within her. As for our male lead, Julian Vance, I deliberately avoided writing him as a suffocating, toxic alpha boss. Yes, he is powerful and wealthy, but he profoundly respects Serena's independence and is entirely willing to compromise for her boundaries. He isn't saving Serena. He is partnering with her. To me, that is what true romance looks like. It isn't one person keeping another in a gilded cage. It's two equals standing shoulder to shoulder, facing the world together. Regarding the classic revenge and glow-up trope, I actually handled it with a lot of restraint. I didn't have Serena arrogantly flex her resume, nor did she go out of her way to destroy the woman in the Chanel suit. Because I truly believe the ultimate comeuppance isn't about publicly humiliating your haters. It's about living a life so undeniably excellent that every doubt cast against you becomes an absolute joke. Serena's mic drop moment didn't rely on Julian's money. It relied entirely on her own hard-earned merit. The second her credentials hit the internet, every person who mocked her was silenced. Not because they feared Julian Vance's wrath, but because they realized this woman was a titan in her own right. That kind of victory is the most satisfying of all. As for Victoria Kensington, I refuse to write her as the stereotypical malicious other woman, because I believe that genuinely exceptional people are capable of recognizing greatness in others. Victoria and Serena are both absolute powerhouses in their respective fields. There is a layer of mutual assessment and subtle competition, but ultimately, they forge a bond of mutual respect born of their shared brilliance. I know this approach might lack the typical soap opera drama, but I find it more authentic and far more elevated. Finally, regarding the core theme of this story, I want to say this. The greatest kind of love is the one that empowers you to become a better version of yourself. And the greatest kind of life is knowing that, with or without that love, you are fully capable of being phenomenal on your own. I hope that everyone reading this story can, like Serena, ignite their own brilliance regardless of their circumstances. Don't wait around for someone else to light up your world. Shine your own light. May every girl grow up to be her own sun.